Hi, everybody. We're back with another episode of the Almost Pro Tips podcast. This is Eric McDowell from SD Gives and the New Med Group, as well as Rural Philanthropy Institute. And I'm here with Julie Oberlander from OneHeart. Hey, Julie.
Hi.
Would you mind starting by introducing yourself and OneHeart's work?
Sure. Yes, I'm Julie Oberlander. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator here at OneHeart in Rapid City. And that role encompasses community outreach, donor engagement. I do a lot of different things here, which I'm sure everybody watching, listening can relate to because we all do a lot of different jobs. OneHeart is a 4-acre college-like campus where we work to create pathways out of poverty for those who desire to thrive. And we do that by reducing and removing as many of the barriers as we can that tend to keep people living in the crisis of poverty. So we have transitional housing for our program participants. We have a transportation program that helps get people to and from work and school. We have dining services, Wi-Fi, which these days is very much a basic need for a lot of people if you're in work or, depending on your work, but also especially school, whether you're a child or an adult, Wi-Fi is super important. We have case management and we use an intervention we call options-based planning to both give people their voice in how their program proceeds, but also plenty of options, plenty of choices to help them get to their goals. And we serve, I think currently we're right about 90 people, but of course it fluctuates just a little bit. I always like to emphasize we're a long-term program looking for long-term solutions to poverty and housing insecurity for the people we serve. So not an emergency shelter, not a day center. We do take referrals from our partnering agencies to get people into our campus and into our programming. But we've been around now only 3 years, a little over 3 years. We opened in January of 2021, and we've served about 250 plus people the last 2 years. So growing and seeing good things happen. But the goal with the guests we serve is that they can have the opportunity to work on changing their own lives for the better. So what they get here is options and opportunities, but they're expected to do a lot of work while they're with us. So I always say they don't pay rent, but it's not a free ride. They do work hard toward goals associated with job, skill, and education.
Well, thanks, Julie. What a wonderful mission, and kudos to all that you've done in just a few years so far.
Yeah, thank you.
Would you talk a little bit about how the Day of Giving fits into some of the fundraising efforts that you have going year round? What is the role of this Giving Tuesday?
Yeah, we have participated in Giving Tuesday, used it as an opportunity to do a big social media push for fundraising the last 3 years, so 21, 22, and 23. It is part of a bigger plan of fundraising, right? Because to focus everything on one day is challenging. The beauty of what South Dakota Gives does is the prompts that help prepare you for that day, and then helped us, especially in 2023, see quite a bit of success on that day. One of them that I really like is the prompt, the prize pool for getting 100% participation from your board of directors. So I am not, in my background or kind of by nature, a fundraiser. I was a journalism major in college. I spent many years on television before I started working with this campus project. And so I was kind of thrown into it in 21 because we were not with a development director that fall. Didn't have a development director, and I knew this was coming up. And so one of the seeds that she had planted was, you can ask for matches. You can get, like, this is a good way to get board members engaged. And so she had kind of just made these off the cuff comments that stuck with me. So in 2021, I had never asked our board for anything really at that point. But the prompt to say, if you can get 100% participation from your board, you're entered into this extra prize pool. That was all I needed. So I approached them in like September or October and said, like, here's this deal. There's no guarantee we're going to get it, but I would love, like, that would be wonderful if you all could make a point of giving on Giving Tuesday. And they did, and they were very generous, and it was awesome. And at the same time, having that seed planted from somebody previously, hey, would anybody be willing to be a match? So if we get, $1,000, could you match up to $1,000? And we had one very generous board member who said, not only will I match 1,000 from outside of the organization, but if we get, every board member participates, I'll match what they give. Up to $1,000. So this one board member actually did a $2,000 match. And so it just was a great way to start that process and have that engagement that, for me, being new to my position, it just worked out really well. And then every year, and especially in 23, I don't know why, I just was like, we're going to hit it hard. I'm going to prep and kind of have everything prepped. And so we saw a lot of success in 2023, and a lot of it was driven by the board, which was awesome. But then we also had a match from a local company, and so it worked out really well. But yeah, it's not just the day, it's the planning that leads up to it, and the awareness that you generate that day for whatever you're trying to raise funds for.
Love to hear more about this other match that you just mentioned. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came to be, what you learned from the process, any advice you would have for others about how to do a match for around the Day of Giving?
Sure. So in 2023, we had a $2,000 match from a local plumbing company, Loyal Plumbing. And we had a good relationship with Loyal actually for a couple of years prior to that. So in the work that we do, we of course try to connect our guests with opportunities for work. And I like to say Rapid City is still a pretty small town in a lot of ways. And so our transformation director here at OneHeart went to high school with the owner of Loyal Plumbing. And they had a conversation a while back, and the transformation director explains what we're doing here to the plumber. And the plumber says, hey, like, if you ever have anybody who needs a job, we're willing to do on the job training. It can be great work. I think we're a good company to work for, blah, blah, blah. Well, about 2 weeks after that conversation, we did in fact have a gentleman on our campus who had a job, but it was not in a trade. I think it was like at a convenience store. He was a clerk, and he had never even thought of plumbing as a profession. And his care coordinator, which is our term for case manager here, had said, hey, have you ever thought about, like, we have this relationship with a plumbing company in town. They know you don't have any experience, but they are willing to train people. What do you think? And he got a job with Loyal, and it was a wonderful job. And he was so proud of it. He said, I never thought I'd have a job that could, like, sustain me and my lifestyle. And so it ended up being a really good thing. So we knew we kind of had cheerleaders at Loyal. We had supporters there, but we hadn't actually received a monetary gift from them. And they had been part of some other things that we'd done on campus. We'd always invited them. We do like mini summits. We did a full day summit last spring, but then we changed it to mini summits to just accommodate more people's schedules, because we're a new program. Giving people an opportunity to kind of deep dive into what we do here, just community members, business owners, government officials, what have you. And so we'd always invited them to that. And I think maybe one of their kind of higher ups was able to come. I can't remember if he could stay the whole time, but we had this relationship. And so at one point I had kind of approached, like, would you ever consider financial support? And it was like, yeah, we'll think about what we want to do. We're very interested. And I think that was last spring around the time of the summit. Well, I kind of, I'd send an email once in a while. I shared like our monthly newsletters. I made sure to send their way those types of things, but still didn't have an actual check, for lack of a better word. And so I learned that they had hired a new marketing person who was going to be in charge of their community outreach efforts as well, because they are a very generous company with a lot of nonprofits in town. And I had a good conversation with her, and I just said, so this was probably the end of summer, and I knew the day of giving is coming, right? And so I just used it as an opportunity to say, there's this day that comes up. This is what we do. It's largely social media driven. And I was very upfront, because she was like, well, how does that work? And so I gave her like, here's what we raised the first year, here's what we raised the second year. So she could kind of gauge, like, we're not asking you to match $100,000. Like, I want to be realistic for both of us. So I said, you can put a cap on it. I gave her just lots of options. And I said, if you can just let me know within this time frame, because if you're not going to do it, I'm going to find somebody who will. And so a couple days later, she emailed me back and said, yeah, we'll do the match. We'll do up to $2,000. So I would just tell people that if that's something you're interested in, which I think is an easy way to, it makes for a good pitch to new donors or even existing donors. Hey, if you give on this day, really you're doubling your impact up to $2,000. Beyond that, of course, technically you're not. But it's a great marketing tool for your other donors. And then I just promised them, I'm gonna let people know about this in the days leading up to it. So I'm gonna be kind of promoting you, and then the day of, I'm gonna be promoting you. And so they were all in and very good about it, and shared some of our posts. So that was, it's the awareness, it's the spread of information. All of those things are super helpful. But yeah, it was actually, I didn't get the match 2 weeks out. We were working on the match for quite a while, but it was a perfect way for that business or that individual who you really feel like, yeah, they want to support you, but they just haven't like taken the step, to get them to take the step.
Yeah, thanks for sharing the kind of the ins and outs of how that came to be, and what you gleaned from it. And it occurs to me that it's not only just that lead up and making sure you have time to arrange it and have a plan B, but it's also, you've had this relationship for much longer than those months and weeks leading up to the day. And that paid off, in a way that maybe you didn't know as you were developing it. So my question to you following from that is, other best practices that nonprofits can be working on throughout the year that you think will pay off during the day of giving?
Sure. I heard, I'm going to steal it from somebody else. I heard on a webinar not too long ago from a fundraiser on the East Coast, where she said, they'd had this fundraising event and they raised a few $100,000, and somebody was just blown away by the number that she was able to give. And she said, but quite frankly, I mean, this is the year's worth of work just culminates in this one event. And so that, I think, is just the thing for me, still learning a lot about the job, because I am, the perfect reminder that it is continuous. And I would just encourage people, make yourself notes when you have those good conversations, and yet somebody doesn't necessarily send a check or doesn't get on your website and put in their credit card information. That's okay. Consider reaching out. Like, they might be the match, or they might just be the person who you say, maybe that they have a heart for, in our case, so this is a good example. We used our funds from the day of giving for our guest welcome baskets. So we're a really big program, and we're doing a lot of things here. But when you tell people, most of the people we serve are not necessarily people experiencing homelessness that you see out on the street. They're people who are in hotels and motels. They're doubled and tripled or quadrupled up with other people. Sometimes they have been living out of their vehicles before they've come to us. So either they don't have bedding or we don't want them bringing it into our residential towers. So here's what we do. We provide basic needs from the moment they walk in, and that's new bedding, that's fresh towels, that's a coloring book if we know it's a family with little kids. This is how we say welcome to OneHeart. Help us say welcome to OneHeart. So for a lot of people, having something that they can kind of wrap their mind around, that's a really quick thing, right? Like that makes sense to people. Whereas sometimes when you're not in the nonprofit world, I think when you talk about case management, they don't know what all that entails. Maybe counseling, that might be easier. We do have an on-site part-time counselor. People kind of understand the mental health, but there's a lot of other things we do that they just kind of go, oh, I don't understand all of those things and how they all work together. But when you say, we have a transportation program that gets people to work in school. We did 3,600 trips almost in 2023. And the number one reason those trips were taken was for the purpose of getting to or from work. Well, a lot of people, especially business people, that resonates, right? So those conversations you have with people that you hear from them something that means something to them. Or maybe I spoke to a banker who said we had a family member who had terrible issues with addiction, and we learned later that there had been abuse as a child that we just didn't know. And so there are things that resonate with that person that we do here to help people. And if you know those things, that's when I think you can go back to them, whether it's on the day of giving or another point in the year when you're looking at something specific you need funding for, to revisit with them.
Yeah, I think we see a lot of success from those campaigns that can focus on a tangible, relatively small goal or item, an impact that a donation is going to make. So I think that's a wonderful example.
Eric, I'll tell you, the one year we didn't do that, when we kept it more open, was actually our lowest year of the three when we had a big focus on Giving Tuesday. That was the one that didn't do as well. And I don't know that it's solely because of it, but I do think you're asking people who maybe only know a little bit about you to give on this day. You got to give them something they can understand, right? So that's where I've opted to try and pick one thing. And that's another thing with the match. I gave Loyal the opportunity to say, if they wanted, I said, here's what I'm looking at doing. Like we can focus on transportation. We can do our guest welcome baskets, which we've done previously. I think raised enough that day to set us up for this whole year. And so they didn't care. So I just went with the welcome baskets, but I also left that you might have somebody who you're like, if we do something that you really like, we can make that the focus of our campaign that day. And I think that might be good for both your campaign and for this donor who now you've gotten in the door with.
Right. That's really smart. And as you talk about some of the work around the campaigns, I'm thinking about the education that you're doing through it, and what success looks like on the day of giving. It can be in dollars raised, but it doesn't have to be in dollars raised. Do you have any words of advice or wisdom that you would share about other ways to think about a successful day of giving than just that dollars raised number?
Yeah. For us, I think it is the awareness and education about the people we're serving. The idea that there's a lot of people who are not on our radar who don't have homes, who don't have permanent housing, and they can be really good candidates for OneHeart. But when they come here, they may not have much, or what they have, again, we're going to tell them not to bring like the bedding. And so it's people, when they hear that, even some of the most plugged in and intelligent people I know are surprised by some of the stories I tell them about the people we serve here. The idea that guests come in and one of the things they like the most is that they can't have visitors of their own in the residential towers. So a lot of people would go, well, they're adults, like, why not? Well, because a lot of the people we're serving have been victims of crime. They are fleeing abuse. They're maybe fleeing a bad family situation. We start with the idea that when you feel safe, then you can start to work on other things that you need to work on, right? But if you don't feel safe, that's really hard to do. And so we put a huge emphasis on safety and security on our campus. And that's something a lot of people might even know that we do, but they really don't understand why. And so those opportunities to explain that, the opportunity to talk about, transportation and how key it is in a city that sprawls 55 square miles, the need for transportation. Yes, we have public transportation, but our guests tell us it can be a half-day ordeal if I have to use the bus. To guarantee I can get to where I need to be and get there on time, our transportation program super, super helpful. Plus the driver's really nice, and cares about how they're doing. And so all of those opportunities to explain those pieces of our program that matter so much to the people we serve, but also to the broader community. So I would that's what I think is so great, is that it's one day, but you can use it to piggyback off of a lot of things you're doing. And I would also say, I think, to be quite honest, in 2023, we only had a couple of brand new donors who gave that day. But now those are people who we have names and addresses for. When we do an event, we can invite them. When we do an appeal next year, we can invite them, so it's never a loss, even if it's not as many new people as you want to see. I know some people who their campaign was the number of donations they got in, which is great. I've never focused it that way, just for no other reason than, we had the match every year. We've had a match. And so I just pushed that, up to $1,000, consider your donation, your impact doubled. So my focus has always just been a little different, but I certainly think there's different ways you can do it on the day of giving, but using those prompts, that they're not just good on the day. So that's what I would tell people, use them. And then what you do gain, even if it's just a little bit on that day, use it for the next year. Find a way to re-engage that person before the next day of giving.
Right, exactly. It's not just the lead up to the day, but what you do after with what happened for you on the day.
Yeah.
Well, Julie, I'd love to ask if you have any other words of advice or tips, things that you would share with your colleagues across the state?
I think it is super important to keep in mind that it isn't just about the one day. I would use the prompts to plant some seeds at other points in the year. And I think that's, for me in 23, that was the most helpful thing I think that we did. Engage the person who is interested, but they just haven't done it yet. That's a really good way to do it. Those are the kinds of things that I think I learned and just focused on, at least last year. And other tips and tricks, I don't know. Keep trying, try all the things, but I think, and I shouldn't say that, prioritize the things that are reasonable. For sure. And that's what we're learning to do more and more here. We, even in how we approach grants and how we approach, events, all of those things. We have a couple of events coming up this year. And one of them, I will be perfectly honest, may not make very much money at all, but we want the awareness. We need the awareness. And we think that's a way to get awareness. And it's also, so we're doing a fun run and walk. it's also a way that our guests can participate and that our guests could give back and not feel like, that they can be part of it and not be a guest for a day kind of thing. So I think that be realistic, but also just keep working hard to reach those next goals. And sometimes you surprise yourself. Like I was very surprised with our Giving Tuesday and just our end of year efforts in general. I think people want to be generous, and sometimes you just got to find the thing that will get them to take that step toward actually giving.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Julie. I appreciate the time and the advice, everything you've learned from the last couple of years of Giving Tuesday campaigns.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.